If you're a mom whose child isn't well, that can be one of the most lonely and isolating experiences. And today we are actually going to kind of jump into this tough topic. This is a part of our life as parents, as moms, that we may find ourselves in, and it can be incredibly lonely and isolating. And I think that it's just a good conversation to have. I also, though, want to go into our conversation today that some of what we talk about may be a little bit triggering to other moms. So I do want to give that disclaimer. Our emotions can be really raw and it can be really challenging. And yeah, let's just be sensitive to that. I'm a new mom, and honestly, this has been a lot harder than I ever expected. My baby isn't doing well, and it feels like no one really understands what it's been like. We're in and out of doctor appointments, waiting on test results, and some days I just feel completely overwhelmed. I love my baby so much, but I feel robbed of the normal newborn experience everyone else seems to have. It's hard not to feel jealous when I see other moms posting about milestones while we're just trying to get through another week waiting for answers. I guess I'm just feeling really alone. This is why I want to have these conversations. So thank you so much for taking the time and just trusting me with this conversation. And I know that you are in a very vulnerable spot in the season of life. You don't say your specific situation. Like, I don't know if your baby's in the NICU. I don't know if your baby is, like you're not sure your baby is going to make it another week. Like, you do say you're just trying to get through another week waiting for answers. Like, I don't know the situation your baby is in, but I can relate. And I think a lot of other moms can relate to being in a position where you realize the fragility of your baby's life. And anytime that there's a situation going on with our kids, like, we as moms, we are intended to be their protectors, like that mama bear instinct. And when we find that our kids aren't well and it is something medical, like, it just feels so much like we recognize how little control we have, especially trying to be the protectors of them, that there's just so much that we can't protect them from. And it's a really hard, just like wanting to take anything that they're experiencing away from them and just be like, I volunteer myself as tribute, like, just let me go through it so they don't have to, is really hard. And I want to validate understanding the season that you are in, because I have been in a similar position. Now, because of that, because I can relate to how hard it is when your child isn't well, I'm going to share some information about my own experience and my son's experience, kind of walking through this as a mom. But before I kind of dive into our conversation, I do just want to say that I'm not going to be sharing a lot of his medical details because I want to keep that information private. But I do want to talk about the scenario, because, like, from a mom's perspective, because I think that you will hopefully find that encouraging. I think maybe the best place for me to start is when we find out that there's something medically wrong with our child. It then feels like there's no way for us to fight against that, because that's beyond our control. Like, it makes us feel so incredibly, like, ill prepared and ill capable to take care of our child, because we can't fix the situation that we're in, and because we can't fix it, we can't protect our child from whatever it is they're experiencing. When my son was going through his medical problems and challenges, there were just so many moments where I was just like, "Ugh, I just want to take all of that pain away. I want to take that entire experience out of your body and put it on me, so that way you don't have to go through those same things. That way you don't have to experience any of this at all. Like, it'll be so much easier if I just physically carry it for you." And recognizing and realizing that that is not an option, it makes you feel so incredibly just like helpless as a parent and as a mom, where you're supposed to be taking care of and providing for your child, and you really physically cannot, because you can't fix the problem. So what was the situation with my child? So my son was born, and I had a lot of complications with his birth and with nursing and bonding, right? If we've hung out at all before, you've kind of heard my previous experience with that, like in my previous conversations. So coming off of all of those challenges and then going into now, like, a couple of months old, like, recognizing that there's also going to be all of these other medical challenges. And some of these challenges we knew when he was born. So when he was born, they do, the medical evaluation and all of that. We were referred to a specialist, and because we weren't sure if he was going to need surgery or not. And so just like all of a sudden, like, knowing, okay, there's already something that's not medically right with my child, and knowing that he's going to possibly have to have surgery is a huge thing to deal with as a parent. And again, feeling like that whole level of like helplessness. And for like, thankfully for his surgery, it wasn't life threatening, but I remember going through all of like the surgery, pre-surgery prep, all of those things, and just like taking my child in for his surgery. And it was something that's like we couldn't choose not to have it done. Like, he needs the surgery. And even though with surgery, like he's such a little baby. Like, I think he was less than 6 weeks when he had his surgery. So they're doing all of the tests, and like just sitting there and like seeing your baby be poked with a needle, and they're screaming and crying. And, like, as a parent, you feel so incredibly helpless. And so I just like reliving all of that is just very hard for me. But let's just start with like me taking him to his surgery. So the surgery that he had was, what do they call it when they discharge you like after your surgery? I don't know, like outpatient surgery. But still, like, taking him in, and we were waiting for him to be prepped for surgery, and like I'm reading through all of like, the paperwork that you have to sign, and my husband's there too, and he's sitting on, like, my child, my very young child is sitting on the bed, and like, waiting for this surgery to happen to him. And just realizing how incredibly frail he looks. Like, he looks so tiny on this big standard hospital sized bed, and like reading through all of these things, all of the warnings and all the liability that the hospital has to put in. And I'm the person that I read every single thing before I sign it. Like, I'm just that way. I want to know all of the risks. I want to know what I'm signing my life away to. And in that moment, I kind of almost wish that I hadn't, because of course they're listing out all of the things that can go wrong with surgery. And just looking over at my son sitting in that bed and being surrounded by all of this like white sterile sheets, and just like realizing how incredibly frail his life was, and knowing, and the nurse came and picked him up, and she walked away, and she was going to take him to finish his surgery prep, because there's, at a certain point the parents aren't allowed back there with him, and he was still awake when he left. And I just remember like, and like he was like over her shoulder, and so like I can just see his little face as she's walking away, and just like wondering when she walked away in that moment, like thinking like, is he gonna come? Is he gonna come back? And like, because even though it's possible, like this surgery is like standard surgery, but just like also knowing anything can happen. And through surgery, like, surgery went longer than they planned, and they took care of the intent for what they were taking care of. But then the surgeon came back and he's like, hey, during surgery, I'm concerned about a few other things. I'm going to send you for additional testing. So it was like, even coming outside of surgery, and then now like having another medical thing to face, when in my mind, oh, surgery should be the final step. Surgery should be the last thing that should take care of it, and he should be healthy, and he should go home. And just like sitting there, and like like he's on the surgery bed like after surgery ended, and he's still like asleep, and just seeing him hooked up to all of these tubes, and just like not responsive to me because he just came out of surgery, and just seeing how incredibly like unhealthy he looked, and how fragile he looked. I was just like realizing again in that moment just like how little control I had over protecting my son. And you as a parent, this, like like life is fragile. It doesn't matter how much it, but there's something different about seeing your child not be healthy and well, that it really ingrains in you. Like, it can be gone in an instant. And just sitting there by his bedside and waiting for him to wake up, and just like stroking his hand while he's got tubes everywhere. And also then now knowing like, okay, this may not be over, this may just have started a snowball of other things that could possibly be wrong that we need to pursue. And how healthy is he going to be, and is this going to be something that is going to continue into his life? It just feels so incredibly helpless. Now, thankfully, he did recover well from surgery, and we took him home. But it did, yeah, I can relate to the fact of like, like you get a test done and you think like, oh, well, once we have the test done, even though you may know this, it feels like, okay, well, once we have the test done, we'll get an answer. But sometimes that's not how things work in the medical field. That's not how life just like lays out for you. It's not this beautiful, like easy picture and this one path to walk down. It's like, oh, well, no, this test gave us new information and now we have to go evaluate this test and this test. And oh, that ruled out this thing, but now we have to have this test and this test. And this gave us new information, but maybe that's not really the full conclusion. And it's just like doctor appointment after test and all of the blood draws and, just like it compounding and snowballing that it's just like, when are we going to find answers? Like, how big of an issue is this? And the entire time also like knowing, like this whole, like for me, I'm a very much like I want to have an answer so I can plan, so I can know what to expect. Like I'm very type A. And being in a situation as a new mom and knowing like, okay, I don't have the answers. I'm not going to get the answers. And the only thing I can do in this situation is wait is very, very hard because it's like, if you don't know the answer, then you can't mentally move forward and emotionally move forward in what the next thing is. Like you're emotionally stuck in limbo. You don't know, you're faced with all of the variable options, and then it's like, wow, I can see all of this, I can have all of this hope on one hand, but then also on the other hand, we could have this really awful negative situation and that could completely change our life. Being stuck in the juxtaposition of the two is so emotionally exhausting. Going through all of this, like it ended up being that, so my husband had, not my husband, my son had, all of these tests done. Thankfully, the thing that they were testing for came back negative, but then outside of all of the tests that they were concerned about from his surgery and the other like possibilities, he needed to wear a brace. And so that was incredibly like cumbersome and challenging for him. And as parents, like we're now seeing this every single day. We're like working with his whole contraption, and the brace was for his good. It was like, as a parent, I was very thankful, like, okay, this is going to help you. This is going to help your future. But also like working around that, it was a visual representation to everybody else that our son wasn't well and our son wasn't like quote normal. And like then being faced with, and I know this is so minute, but this is another factor of when you have a child that isn't well and other people know that your child isn't well, you're also dealing with all of the other questions and concerns and like people that are trying to be empathetic and supportive, where they may say things that are not, that don't hit your heart as empathetic or supportive, that it can just be like a little bit triggering for you. That it's like, again, another layer of emotional like rawness that brings up in you that's just like it's exhausting. It's exhausting. And I remember going through that and my son coming out on the other side. So he's had his surgery. That's been resolved. We had this other concern from his surgery that had been resolved. He had his brace. And I just remember like then going into like I think he was maybe around 2-ish. And there was a family that we were friends with. They had a son very similar in age and we had them over to our house. Now at this point in time, we weren't around a lot of other families. Like we were pretty isolated in like our everyday interactions. Like the people we interacted to were just adults. It wasn't a lot of other kids. So when this other family came over and we saw their son compared to our son was talking up a storm, like just babbling and talking in like full sentences. And I realized just how little my son said. And now my son was doing a really good job communicating. Like we use sign language and like he would make all of these vocal inflections, but he had very few words. And seeing him next to my friend's son, who was like a couple months younger than him, and realizing, wow, there is a huge like disparity here. And my husband had been like maybe suggesting it to me before, not maybe, he was suggesting it before, like, hey, I don't think he's saying quite as much as he should, or like he should have more words than he does. Then I would just be like, oh no, like I think it's okay. Let's just give him more time. Yeah, his speech might be a little bit delayed, but he'll catch up. And then now seeing that like between my friend's son and my son in the same room, it was just that realization of like, wow, he is really behind. And I bring that up because having had this experience where they had a very normal birth, they had a very normal like a whole experience, like they did not go through the same challenges that we went through with my son. And after they left, I remember feeling just like so defeated. I wasn't upset about the fact that we needed to or the effort that it was going to take. Like, I wanted to make sure that my son had what he needed to thrive. But it was just feeling like, gosh, can we not get a break? Like, why is it that their son and then they as a like family get to experience all of the beautiful aspects of like a normal childhood and a normal parent experience, yet like here we are and we've gone through like three things already, three medical concerns, and then now he might have another issue. Like, can we not just catch a break? um so I can understand where moms feel like, moms that find themselves in this position, there can be a level of jealousy of just like, I don't want to be around other moms and other families that have had a normal experience, have a healthy child, because it's challenging for me because my child is not healthy. And that has nothing to do necessarily because I desire your child to be unwell, but just more so the fact like it's another reminder of how unwell my child is, and how like, again, that whole feeling of failure as a parent because you can't provide what your child needs in the same way. Like, it's not just like making sure your child has enough food and has clothing and has what they can to thrive. Like, these are things outside of your control, outside of your ability to provide for them. So after kind of realizing again that my son was going to be having this whole another like challenge with his speech, we did the appointments, started over again, like have to, have an evaluation, and where is he going to get support, and who does he need to be referred to, and are they going to refer him to someone else, and is that going to be lead to another layer of specialists on the other side of it. I'm thankful that I went through that experience so that way I can help encourage other moms and understand where they're coming from. And even though I say like I'm on the other side of it, like I'm on the other side of it and where it is easier, but it is something that my son, even though he is doing so much better, it is still something with his speech anyway that we are still addressing, and we will continue to be addressing as he progresses through life until to the point that he has met his milestones. He is at a level where he is going to succeed without any additional help. And I think sometimes we as moms can sit there and feel so much guilt on ourselves to be like, why didn't I recognize the signs? Why didn't I know? Why didn't I seek help sooner? Oh, if I had just advocated for my child more, or if I had just taken them to the doctor sooner, or if I had just sought out a specialist, or just asked for a referral, or whatever. There's all of these what ifs that we put on ourselves as moms to say like, oh, it was my responsibility, it was my job, why didn't I? And we carry all of this really heavy guilt in a situation that it's already heavy. Like, we don't need to add any more emotional weight to us. Like, I'm sure the weight you're already carrying is enough, but we carry this heavy weight of guilt around with us because we are disappointed in the expectation and the threshold that we have set for ourselves as moms. And something that I had to really learn myself through going through these situations is that I had to give myself grace that I made the decision with the information that I had at the time. And I can look back on that and say like, oh, that was a poor decision for me to make. Oh, if I had just, going down that whole rabbit hole of, oh, if I had just, but also like, if it was someone else in that situation, I wouldn't put the same expectation on them. I wouldn't hold them to the same high standard. I would probably understand where they're coming from and say like, oh yeah, that makes sense why you made that decision. We judge ourselves too harshly because we have all of this new information on the other side of the situation where we can't judge ourselves at the same level because we didn't have the same information at the time that we made those decisions because we didn't know. And so if you're carrying around that guilt too, in addition to everything else that you're currently experiencing already with your child, to just give yourself some grace. And even if you need to, forgive yourself, because like I look back at myself in that situation with my child, with my son, and his like need for speech and his need for intervention. And I'm just like, oh, I wish that I had just made the decision and listened to my husband sooner. But at the time, everything that I knew was just, well, he'll catch up. That's normal, because that's what I was told. That's what I expected. I made that decision based off of the information I had at the time. And I need to respect that decision that I made. I hope that you found some encouragement in our conversation today. I know that this was really a tough topic to talk to, and because I don't know everything about your situation, the only thing I have to fall back on is my own. So I hope that you found something encouraging. And other moms that may be listening, if you can relate to anything that I said, or if you have anything encouraging that you could add, I would really recommend for you to drop it below for either this mom or any other mom that happens to find themselves in a very similar conversation, or not conversation, but situation. Considering that your child may be in a in a situation where they are sick and having visitors may not be appropriate, or maybe you need to limit visitors for your own health of your baby, you might find one of our other conversations helpful where I talk about like setting and enforcing newborn visitation rules. I know may not be specific to your unique situation if you don't have a newborn baby, but you might still find some of the like boundaries and how to communicate those rules to your family still really helpful. So I'll link up that conversation for you next.